Roguelike games are usually randomly generated high-skill games that often punish the player with perma-death. Action roguelikes take this formula and add combat that requires mechanical skill alongside level design that puts you in the driver's seat. These games are pretty popular, and when a new one drops, you're almost guaranteed to see a first look that might show the tutorial, maybe the first boss, and then the eventual death. But today, I want to show you a little bit more than that. I want you to see what makes the games great. So today, we're going to do a deep dive into this action roguelike Trinity Fusion.
We've lost control of the multiverse that we created. And now the only way to save ourselves is to destroy it.
In Trinity Fusion, you play as Altera, sometimes Kara, sometimes Naira, sometimes Alkara.
It's a fusion gate. We can use it to temporarily fuse you with Naira or Altara.
Basically, it's a multiverse with 3 different characters. In each character's home universe, they fight against unique enemies to their universe with their unique skill set. Kara is basically your melee fighter. She has pretty fast-paced attacks, a heavy attack, and skills that are very much like a fighting game. Naira is probably a melee ranged hybrid. She has some assassin-style gameplay, but she also comes with double jump and wall jump that Kara actually does not have. And then Altera might be more of a mage or a technical fighter. She comes equipped with a drone that allows her to teleport over a short distance. Again, something that neither Kara nor Naira have. And the reason why is that on each world, each character has to deal with different metroidvania elements that the other ones do not. As you see, the game has heavy influences from things like Dead Cells or Metroid Dread. You go through a biome, fight monsters, sometimes they're robots, sometimes they're actual creatures, in order to reach the final boss of whichever universe you're in. Sometimes you'll run across your alter ego in this lens, and you can actually fuse into them and gain some of their power. For example, fusing with Altera gives you access to both her skill and her drone. As you're fighting monsters, you quickly realize that each individual monster is actually pretty strong in this game. So there's a real emphasis on your own mechanical skill in order to defeat anything that comes in front of you. Kara, for example, only has her melee attack and her heavy weapon. Each weapon has its own combo set, so I have to do things like a heavy attack from the air, charge heavy attack to knock enemies upward, combos with my primary attack, air slashes upward, air slashes downward. She has pretty much anything you could possibly want. Eventually, she'll end up getting skills, and the skills make her look even better as a melee fighter. And when you compare that to Altera, who has all these spells, I can basically blow up monsters from a distance, which is kind of a big difference between these two characters. But then there's also Naira, who has ranged attacks. I might have a shotgun, I might have a sniper rifle. She actually has a lot of options to her, which makes Naira unique from the other two. So as I said, very heavy Metroidvania influences on this. You traverse through a map, you get to the next area, and sometimes the area leads you to something called the in-between. And this is not a Metroidvania at all. This setup is more like a Hades style, where you actually go through individual fights and you pick a route in order to get a reward from that route. Sometimes it's a fight that you have to do, sometimes it's actually a platformer you have to do, and these get pretty complex. So not only do I have to learn how to do combat, but I also have to learn how to do these jump puzzles as well. Once you get through all of that, you end up fighting the boss. Each individual boss has different kinds of attacks they'll throw at you. Oftentimes they have only one side that takes damage, so you have to make sure that you are dodging properly to get to the right side. There's actually a lot of options towards doing each individual fight, and because you have different characters, each one might handle a fight differently. But because this is an action roguelike, you can't forget about the choices you make in order to get to this point. In Trinity Fusion, you run across these machines called Amplifiers. The Amplifier is your classic pick a power-up that will supplement your build. You have a choice of 3. Picking up one provides whatever buff is listed on the card, and then you actually get a point towards that card's family that maxes out at 3. At 3 points, that family will give you a special buff, most of which have like a major impact on your actual gameplay. So rather than just picking each individual thing that works for you, you're also trying to stay within certain families in order to get that final buff, which is especially interesting when you're presented with something like a duo amplifier, which will give you points in both families that the duo comes from. I've had situations where I maxed out health, maxed out healing received, get bonus damage when I take a hit, heal if I kill enemies within a certain amount of time. I've seen builds that revolve around doing critical hits. You do bonus damage from behind an enemy. If an enemy has a status effect, it might take critical damage. There's actually a lot of combinations, and I've only seen so much of the game thus far. Of course, a big part of what you want to see in games like this are the different difficulty options. For those who are relatively new to action roguelikes, it does have a survivor mode. This is usually a nice way to get your currency and then get your first wins in the game. Of course, we have our normal difficulty. And then the game actually has something called hardcore mode. From talking to the devs, a lot of the dev team actually prefers this as their standard way to play the game. In hardcore mode, arenas spawn more waves of enemies. There are more elites than normal. Damage dealt to the player is a little bit higher. The enemy units get stronger over time as you stay in the map for too long. And probably most importantly, if you take too many hits without killing an enemy, you actually get sent back to base regardless of your remaining HP. What's different about this hit punishment system is that every time you kill an enemy, you get like 1 counter restored. But this mode is definitely designed for people who pretty much know what they're doing when it comes to Trinity Fusion. With all these different difficulty options, I find this game to be the right kind of challenge for whatever specific difficulty you're playing on. This game is designed for you to play on the difficulty that suits you best, and then when you're ready to move on, you can do so at any time. Except for hardcore, which is unlocked after you beat the veteran difficulty. Honestly, I've played a lot of action roguelikes, and most of the time they don't really get particularly difficult until very, very late on. But Trinity Fusion was already giving me challenge in the very first hour of me playing the game. As soon as I figure out how characters work and then get the overall flow of battle, I started doing much better, and that ends up being that reward system that a lot of games fail to actually capture. Essentially, the more you play the game and the more you understand the flow of combat, the better the game looks, the better the game plays, and the more fun that you have as you're playing through it. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching. I always love doing more than just the first look and really getting into the nitty-gritty of what each of these games has to offer. I do read each and every comment, so feel free to ask questions or leave feedback. Like the video, subscribe if you want to see more things like this. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the vid, and I'll catch you next time.